Think about the somatic impact of chronic self-silencing, because it's not just a self-abandonment on a soul and emotional level, it's physiological. It's that moment where your throat tightens, or you feel fatigue, inexplicably exhausted, or a dullness in your life, a creative stagnation, or you're feeling emotionally shut down. When every time you suppress your truth, you teach your nervous system that my truth is not safe here. And over time, your voice becomes the first thing that you lose. And your body doesn't trust to speak what's real, so it closes down. Welcome to It's Not What You Think, the podcast that takes you on a transformative journey to rewrite your story of greatness and reawaken your soul's purpose. I'm your host, Celinne DaCosta, a subconscious mind expert, master coach, and believer in the limitless power and magic that lives within all of us. My intention in this podcast is to propel you into your next level of success so that you are free to create the life that your heart most desires. Through deep, actionable insights, personal stories, and world-class guests, I'll provide you with the tools, strategies, and resources you need to unlock the fullest expression of who you're meant to be in this lifetime, so that you can consciously design a reality that is beyond what you could have ever dreamed of. Join me on this journey to personal growth and evolution, and let's live our lives in accordance with our highest soul's calling. This podcast is your weekly check-in to help this path become more simple, obtainable, and fun. Thank you for tuning in today, and now let's dive in. Hello, familia, and welcome to today's journey. We are diving into what it looks like and feels like to speak, even if your voice shakes. And what we're going to be exploring today is having the courage to speak, the cost of remaining silent when there's truth that wants to come through you, and the intelligence that moves through your voice. So, I'm going to open this by sharing a personal story where I almost held back my truth. Actually, I wanted to push it down. I wanted to not say the thing that I really meant, but I chose to speak instead. So a few years ago, I was sitting in a medicine ceremony with peyote, which is a sacred cactus medicine used by indigenous peoples for thousands of years. And this was actually a ceremony that I had called forth. I had sponsored this ceremony with the intention. I had sponsored it actually in the name of love. That was the intention and the prayer of the ceremony. And specifically for myself, this was right off the back end of a really difficult and painful breakup. And I was desiring to call in love and family into my life. And, we're sitting, for those of you not familiar with these ceremonies, these are like 12 plus hour ceremonies where everyone is sitting inside of a teepee, up to like, sometimes you can have, in my specific ceremony, there was like 40 people all gathered in a circle, sitting around a fire, sitting up, singing and praying, and dancing. And it was intense, all through the night, from sunset all the way into sunrise. And there was a moment where the medicine man who was facilitating the ceremony, he turns to me and he says something along the lines of, "Well, Celinne, you called this prayer forward. You called this ceremony into being. What is it that you really want? What do you want for yourself?" And, I started saying something along the lines of, "Well, I'm calling this forth because for love, and love is really important. And I think we all need to have love." And then he just interrupts me. He's like, "Yes, I understand why you call this ceremony forward for the collective, but why did you do it for you? What's your reason?" And when he cornered me with that very precise, pointed question. I felt like the air got knocked out of my lungs. I was just like, oh, I was breathless. I tried to avoid the answer, but I couldn't. And I knew in that moment there was like this deep impulse within just the depths of my being that was like, you have to answer. And I even started to speak, and it was very, and he's like, I want you to turn to the fire, and I want you to speak your truth to the fire. And I'm going to ask you to dig deep and tell us the truth. And what I can describe, the best way I can describe this is I was sitting on my knees in front of the fire, and there was a circle of about 40 sets of eyes staring at me. And I remember I was shaking. I was shaking. And at the same time, there was a truth rising in my chest so strongly that I felt I would suffocate if I didn't speak. So I wanted to push it down. I wanted to not say the thing that I wanted to say, but I had to. And the way that it felt in my body is I went into the depths of my being. I went inside and I started to excavate and dig and dig and dig and dig to the depths of my being to find the words to describe what it truly was that I wanted when it came to the love that I desire to call into my life and having a family and how I wanted to experience my life, like the truth of it. And I remember it was like the equivalent of it was I was digging through a barrel and there was a voice inside of me that was like, dig deeper. And I would dig and I would hit another layer and I was like, no, dig deeper. And I found that place in the depths of my heart where I reached in and somehow I pulled out the words. And when I spoke those words into the fire, I could see, I had this visceral experience of witnessing the visceral impact that my words were having on the room. As I shared my heart to a group of 40 people, a lot of them who were strangers. And as I shared, this is what I want with my life. These are my deepest fears. This is what I truly desire and why I desire it and what I dream about. And what I'm most afraid of not getting in this lifetime. And what I pray to God I'll be able to experience within this soul's journey. And as I was speaking, it was like vroom, 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 vroom. Like the vibration of my voice was doing something to the room. I could feel it viscerally. The power of owning my truth. And more than that, speaking it, articulating it. And of being seen in my vulnerability, in my fear, in my rawness. It did something to me. It changed me. And it did something in the room. And I know that for sure, not just because I felt it viscerally in the moment as I was sharing everything that was inside of me at the bottom of that barrel in that ceremony where I poured my heart out to a group of people. And I know it because of the volume of people that came up to me afterwards and said, oh my God, I can't believe you spoke it like that. It felt so real. It felt so true. And it helped me realize this about myself. It helped me realize the ways I have these fears and I'm not owning them. It helped me realize that I really want this for my life too, but I wasn't admitting it to myself. And the crazy thing is that years after that ceremony, I still encounter people who were in that ceremony who say to me that day, that transmission changed something for me. Funny enough, and this is just a cherry on top. That day, in that ceremony, there were two women who deeply desired to become mothers, like I did. And those two women, they got pregnant a year and change later on the same exact day, and they gave birth to babies on the same exact day. And so there's unspeakable magic that happens when we have the courage to open our voice and share our truth. And you may not have been in a medicine ceremony before, and that's not really a key component of this point that I'm making. Because even if you haven't had this experience exactly, in your way yourself, I know you felt this before. It's part of the human experience. That moment when your truth rises and you want to say it and maybe you nearly leave it behind. Or that moment where the truth rises from within you and you have the courage to speak and it makes a difference in your life and in the lives of others. And so as we have this conversation of what it actually means to unlock your voice, to speak your truth, it's important to also understand the hidden cost of self-silencing. There's a really lovely paradox here because I'm a mentor that supports leaders with unlocking their voice. I help people tell their story, to communicate authentically from their heart, to use their voice as a vehicle for conscious leadership. And yet at the same time, I have seasons. I've had several seasons where I couldn't fully speak my truth. And, I'm a believer that we teach what we are most here to learn, that what we're here to teach and support others with is the curriculum that our soul wants to take us through. And I have found that to be true over and over again as I continue to be a student of my very own work and a practitioner as well. And one of the things that I noticed is that part of my work is to consistently unpack all of the ways that I am getting in the way of truth and all of the ways that I've unconsciously relapsed into masterfully performing instead of transmitting. And I've noticed this not just in myself, but in my clients' lives as I continue to do this work and ask the bigger questions of life, which is, why do we close up? What is truth anyway? What does that even mean? And why are we afraid to speak it? Why are we afraid to speak up in a way that feels authentic, real, and impactful to us? And by the way, I'm not just speaking about public speaking here or big conversations, right? Because what it really is all about when we talk about how we self-silence, it's actually about the micro abandonments. It's holding your tongue at dinner when, you're had a family dinner with your family and somebody says something incredibly inappropriate or racist or just politically incorrect or just ignorant, and you hold your tongue to keep the peace. It's toning down your truth to keep the peace when someone says something that is flat out correct, but because you're in a position of authority or because you don't want to not be liked, you don't say anything to correct that conversation. Or it's like replaying a conversation and thinking to yourself, I should have said something. How many times has that happened to you? Where you think back on, wow, that was the moment I should have said something. Or it's hiding behind eloquence, behind polished, correct words that sound really nice instead of raw honesty, even if it sounds messy, even if you stumble as you speak. It's delaying sharing the message because it's not perfect yet. When you have that post, but you keep over polishing it, or you have that email that you want to send, or you have that thing you want to say, but it's not perfect. So you delay and you put it off. And think about the somatic impact of chronic self-silencing, because it's not just a self-abandonment on a soul and emotional level, it's physiological. It's that moment where your throat tightens, or you feel fatigue, inexplicably exhausted, or a dullness in your life, a creative stagnation, or you're feeling emotionally shut down. When every time you suppress your truth, you teach your nervous system that my truth is not safe here. And over time, your voice becomes the first thing that you lose. And your body doesn't trust to speak what's real, so it closes down. And so that we can be really on the same page here, I want to define, at least in my experience, when I speak about what it means to be in your truth. What does that actually mean? So let's get on the same page in terms of definition. So I see truth as the direct expression of essence into form without distortion. So truth is the direct expression of essence, soul, into form without distortion. So breaking that down, what do I mean by essence? By essence, I mean the original frequency of you, your soul, your deep knowing, that intangible, this is your spirit. This is who you are at a core level. That's your essence. Expression is the movement of that essence into thought, emotion, word, or action. It's how you express your soul into something that exists. And without distortion, what I mean by that is without manipulation, without self betrayal, without masking or fear driven editing. So, a point that I really want to get across here is that truth is not about being right, it's not a rigid fact. Truth is fidelity to the original frequency you are carrying. Truth is being loyal to the frequency that's moving through you in your soul. So when I say be in your truth, what that means is be in a direct expression of your essence or your soul essence into form without distortion. And so if you reflect upon how many times in your life, heck, even throughout your day, where you're distorting the true, authentic expression of your essence so that you can fit in, so that someone else is happy or placated, or pleased, so that you can keep the peace, so that you can receive love, so that you can be accepted, so that you can fit in. But when you silence yourself, it comes with a cost. It comes with the cost of self-abandonment. It comes with the cost of the somatic impact that your body does keep the score. And it comes with the cost of chipping away at your nervous system and training yourself unconsciously that when you speak, when you express your essence without distortion, it's not safe. So you've got to keep it in. And over time, it becomes harder and harder to speak your truth. And, in full honesty, the reason why I can speak so deeply into this with such clarity is because I've been through it. One of my gifts is being able to speak my truth. I was given the gift of word, you could say, since I was a child. And I've also gone through several rounds of feeling like I needed to silence myself in my intimate relationships, in my family dynamics, and as an adult in my business, out of the fear that I would get canceled, out of the fear of judgment, out of the fear of being misunderstood, out of the fear of initiating rupture in a relationship or conflict, out of the fear of emotional exposure, of someone seeing how angry I was, just how hurt I was, just how distressed I was by their actions, and out of the fear of being heard, actually, and the responsibility that speaking your truth into form on a public forum actually brings, which is where a lot of people completely miss. And these fears that I'm speaking into are the reasons why I've held my voice and I've defaulted into performance in the past. And they're not conscious. You know, when I speak with clients and people from all kinds of walks of life, but people who desire to stand on a stage in front of thousands and speak their story, people who want to write a book that millions will read, people who are leading a team that is impacting millions of people, generating millions, if not billions of dollars. We all have our reasons, our respective reasons for wanting to share our truth. And it boils down to this desire to contribute as a human being, this desire to make positive impact through our message, through our story, through our lessons, through our wisdom. But underneath the reason why we swallow our truth are all of these fears that I've just spoken into. But here's the thing, right? I'm sure you can relate to that fear of judgment and being misunderstood and conflict, emotional exposure. But the thing that really gets people, especially those in leadership position, the super duper blind spot that I have found when it comes to people who are desiring to get more visible so that they can create a bigger impact on the world, is that it's not just about being afraid of being judged. Sometimes we're actually afraid of being understood. Because if somebody really hears us, what will they ask us to become? What will we have to change? What will we no longer be able to ignore? And that's what I mean by responsibility. Example, if we take a stand, you're a company and you take a stand and you speak your truth about the environment and how much you care about the environment and how we need to treat the environment better. And we're heard and seen in that message and we're understood in that message, we're going to be held responsible to the way that our business operates, in the sense of, well, what are your, what are you doing about it in your own business? How are you sustainable in your own business? If you're speaking about the importance of sustainability, how are you sustainable in your own business? And if you're not, who are you gonna need to fire? What policies are you going to need to have in place that is going to disrupt the current company culture that goes against the values that you're speaking into? What is it that you can't ignore? What is it that you can no longer tolerate? What is it that is happening behind closed doors that is not in integrity with the truth that you're speaking into form? So a lot of people, there's this array of fears that we don't speak our truth because of fear being judged and misunderstood and all those things. And those are the classics. But the blind spot for a lot of people is, what if somebody hears you and then they hold you accountable for what you're speaking into form? And what if you are not yet in integrity with the things that are coming out of your mouth? What if your words don't match your actions? But you're speaking the words and people are hearing you speak the words and they're seeing you speak the words. What does that mean? It means you're going to have to change. It means you're going to need to stop tolerating, stop ignoring the things, the actions, the realities in your 3D life that are no longer in alignment with the truth that you're speaking. And that's another unconscious reason why a lot of people will swallow their truth. They're too afraid to speak it out loud. Because if you speak out loud the truth of, I desire a sustainable business, and then the facts is that you haven't built that for yourself, there's a mismatch. You spoke the truth of your desire, you spoke the truth of your heart, but there's a gap. Or when you speak your truth of, I'm here to have a loving partnership, a loving relationship. And that's the truth. Without distortion, without manipulation, I'm not happy in my relationship. Well, when you speak your truth, you will see and you will viscerally feel the way that there's a disconnect. Maybe you're in that toxic relationship and you need to let go of. Maybe you need to do some inner work so you can become a match for a healthy relationship. So there are consequences to speaking our truth without distortion, without manipulation, without hiding from ourselves. And that's where most people don't realize the ways that they're blocking themselves from expressing authentically, you know? And the other thing that comes up a lot for people is the fear of abandonment by the ones you love, by your tribe. And it looks like the inner narrative of, how often do you think, for example, you're about to speak something, you're in a group setting, you're in a group circle, and someone says something and you're like, huh, that's strange. You're like, I want to respond to that. Ooh, I want to say something. And then you shut it down because your mind is going something along the lines of, it's not worth it. No one's going to care. They're not going to get it. They're not going to get what I'm saying. I don't really have the right words to say it. But the thing is that if you don't believe your voice is worth listening to, is worth hearing, it just won't get said. And the world will never know the version of itself that your truth could have shaped. And what's important to understand is that not speaking your truth isn't failure. It's programming. But you get to choose again. You get to make that choice. And that does require you to do some inner work. It requires you to look within and ask the big questions. Why am I swallowing my truth? And to identify what are all those micro moments where I'm abandoning myself? The dinner table, the conversation with a friend, those moments where you laugh even though you don't think it's funny at that derogatory comment. What are those little paper cuts where you are abandoning yourself and not speaking up even though you want to say something? And the second part of that is, why aren't you saying something? And underneath the usual culprits of, I'm afraid of being misunderstood, not being seen, being rejected, and all of those, common humanity factors. Also asking yourself the question, maybe I'm also afraid of being heard, because if I'm heard and I'm being seen in my truth, then that is going to ask me to step into another level of accountability and responsibility, because I'm going to need to own my truth and I'm going to need to change the way I'm operating so I can be in alignment to my truth. That's a big one. So, that brings me to the next point, which is that the voice inside of you is a sacred signal. When you have, again, transport yourself to one of those memories, one of those moments in your life where you're sitting in a conference room, or you're sitting in a conversation at dinner with your friends, or you're sitting in a group sharing circle, you're sitting in front of your partner, and you have that ache in your chest. You feel an impulse to say something, even if it's messing. That's not random. It's life asking to move through you in real time. And I believe that when you learn to truly, deeply listen to and understand that impulse, it's not about ego, it's actually encoded truth, asking for embodiment. And so I'll share an example of a visceral experience that I had, a memory of when I was a child. I was about 15 years old. And at the time, I grew up in the Catholic, Catholic Christian church. And I'm not Catholic anymore, but, we used to be a Roman Catholic. I mean, I was born in the heart of freaking Rome, Italy. Like, talk about Catholic. I was born a stone's toss away from the Vatican. And yeah, my mother, my grandmother, my family is very Catholic. And I remember in my teenage exploratory years, I had a good friend of mine who she was part of a different church, Seventh Day Adventist. And I would honestly, truth be told, I would go to church with her, but not really because I was engaged with the material or the religion, but rather because it was a really fun social event for me. I would go to church, and then afterwards they had like a youth group. Um, and because I was friends with her and a couple of her friends, it was just a chance for me to hang out with my peers and just, you know, shoot the shit after church. And it was good people, it was good fun. So I would just go to church as part of that, being part of that social event. And my mom would ask me, she would get very triggered and angry, and she'd be like, "Why are you going to church? Why are you going to this? It's not even your church, and you're not even going to church anymore. Like, why their church, not my church?" And I was like, "Mom, honestly, it's just for the social life." Like, and I invited her to come with me. I said, "Why don't you come with me?" Oh, little did I know that on that specific day and on that specific sermon, the preacher would be talking about the Pope, the Catholic Pope, to be specific. Well, the only Pope, but just in case. Um, and I remember just we're sitting in the wooden benches, and my mom's right next to me, and this preacher is has a photo of John Paul II, a pope that actually blessed my mother's pregnant belly with me in it. When she was 8 months pregnant. So she had a personal interaction with this Pope, a personal connection with him. And they had put his photo on a big slideshow. And the preacher was talking about something along the lines of the sins of the Catholic Church, and how the Pope was evil. And it just, to be honest, I was only half paying attention because I was texting on my phone. I was just being a teenager. And at one point, I could feel my mom just getting riled up next to me. Just the heat was emanating from her body. And at one point, she stood up. And this was like, I don't know, at least 100 people, if not more. It was full. The church was full. She stands up and she says in a roaring voice, with her finger pointed at the preacher, "I don't agree with that." And just shock. And you can imagine, I was mortified. Like, "What are you doing? Mom, stop. What are you doing?" And just thinking like, "Oh my God, everybody's looking at us right now. What are people going to think? Am I going to lose all my friends? Shit. And I'm just sitting there, and my mom is just like, "No, I don't agree with that." And, I don't remember the specificity of what exactly she said, but it was something along the lines of, "How dare you sit in front of this entire group of people and call yourself a preacher as you're sitting there talking shit about another religion and calling the Pope the devil? You don't even know him. Have you even met him?" Pigs. And I'm just sitting there. "Ah!" And, the preacher's completely shell shocked. And he's like, "But, we're speaking, this is our religion, this is," he was trying to defend himself and saying, "This is our religion, like we have the right to speak into what we want to say." And my mom's retorting, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I thought religion was about love, and here you are spreading hatred. regardless of what it is that you think about the religion. She's like, you can think whatever you want about the religion, but you're sitting here spreading hate about it. And I thought religion was about love. And they're just going at it in this freaking back and forth. And at one point, my mom desists, she completes, and she sits back down, and she's got a frown on her face. And the preacher comes up after hers and tries to talk to her, and they have another debate. And I'm just sitting in my shell of mortification, just being so embarrassed about what just happened. And I remember being angry at her. I remember being like, how could you do this? You embarrassed me in front of all of my friends, and da 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 da. But over time, I realized something. That moment when she stood up and she spoke her truth directly, without distortion, the truth of what was in her heart, I changed. Something inside of me deeply shifted from that moment. And I bet, I don't know, but I would bet money that there's other people that were in that room who will still remember that day where that lady stood up and started screaming at the preacher, pastor, however, whatever the narrative around it is. It was pretty unforgettable. And in that moment, what she was modeling for me was integrity and sacred disruption. And what does it actually look like to stand in the line of fire and stand up for what you believe in? And by the way, this isn't about being right, okay? Whether you agree with it being appropriate for somebody to stand up in the middle of Mass, whether you're Catholic, or you're Seventh-day Adventist, or you're something else, and you think that was rude, whatever it is that you think about, her actions, it wasn't about being right. It was about being real. She didn't have credentials or permission. She's no pastor. She was no, religious scholar, but she had truth. And she didn't wait for anyone to validate it. She wasn't asking around being like, hey, I'm thinking this way. Is it okay for me to say this? Is it okay for me to stand up right now? She wasn't waiting for validation. In that moment, she became the mirror that I didn't know I needed. And she showed me, boom, I believe in this. I'm going to stand up for my truth. I don't care what anyone else thinks. This isn't right. I don't believe in this. This isn't right. And I will have the wherewithal to stand in a group in front of hundreds of people. And I will speak the truth, even if everyone in this freaking room hates me for it. And I believe I've had many, many moments in my life, maybe not as eruptive or dramatic, but there's many moments in my life that I can name since then where I either had this impulse go through my body where I'm like, I want to speak right. This isn't right. And I swallowed it. I pushed it back down out of all those fears I've named. But I've also had moments where I spoke up and it changed something in the room. And I believe we've all had moments like that. Either when we spoke or when someone we loved spoke and it rattled us to our core. But the part of us that got rattled, that was the part trained to stay silent. Your voice is not here to keep people comfortable. It's here to make the truth unavoidable. And I believe that truth is the highest, most powerful frequency there is. It has the power to cut through noise. It has the power to cut through the illusion and all that is not real. And again, this isn't about your truth being right. It's about your truth being real and having the courage to speak it because it needs to be. Take a moment to think about a time when you wanted to speak and you didn't. What stopped you? What stopped you from speaking up? Was it fear? Was it any of the fears that I've named in this episode so far? And now I'm going to ask you the question. What would have been different if you had spoken up? What would have been different? Have you had an experience where you're sitting in a group and you're thinking something to yourself? You're like, oh my God, this isn't right. Or I don't agree with this. Or this feels really icky in my body. I don't agree with this. And you're not saying it. Or you want to say something and you're afraid that people are going to judge you or think you're weird or think you're a freak or whatever the story is. And then someone else in that circle says the thing you wanted to say, says the thing you were thinking, has the courage to say it. And all of a sudden, boom, pop. People are like, oh my God, I wish I feel that way too. Thank you so much for saying that. And then you think to yourself, damn, I wish I said that. The ego comes in sometimes as well. And the ego is like, shit, I wish I said that and gotten the credit for that because I was thinking it the whole freaking time and all this other person said it. You know, I had another experience, and this is another peyote ceremony. It sounds like I do a bunch of peyote ceremonies. I don't, but it just so happens that in this conversation, clearly there's two that come to mind. So there was another moment. This was actually my very first peyote ceremony. And it's not common in peyote for you to need to throw up. It's something very common in ayahuasca and other ceremonies where you need to purge, basically vomit the medicine. In peyote, it's not so common. But I remember the facilitator of that ceremony saying something along the likes of, hey, if you need to vomit, please do it in the fire in front of everybody so you can get well, so you can basically be an example of what it looks like to get well, is what they call it. And so they would actually encourage you to vomit in the fire in front of everybody. And I remember I was like getting really nauseous for I don't even know how long, hours. I was getting really nauseous and I wanted to puke and I wanted to puke and I wanted to puke. But I was so embarrassed about throwing up in front of, again, 40 plus strangers that I kept trying to hold in my vomit. And it was getting to this point where I was just sweating. And I was getting nervous and I was getting angsty and uneasy. And I really needed to puke. And so at one point, when the group broke out into song, I seized the moment and I ran to the toilet, which was outside of the teepee, far away, and I puked my brains out. And I remember puking and feeling the relief in my body, be like, oh, I'm so glad I did that. And wipe myself clean, make sure I was presentable and looking good. And then I walked back into the teepee. And when I walked back in, there was another man who was standing with his arms out. He was standing, legs apart, arms out, receiving a blessing from the shaman. So the shaman was just like, he had a big feather in his hand and he was waving kapal, just cleansing this person's aura and just giving them a blessing. And I sat down and I was like, oh, this is curious. What happened when I was gone? And I turned to the person next to me and I asked, what happened? And the person says, oh, well, he got well, AKA he threw up. He threw up in the fire. He was the first one to throw up in the fire. And so the shaman's giving him a blessing, because he's the first person to show an example what it looks like to get well. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? I definitely threw up before him. What are you saying? Like, did you not see me run out of that toilet? And in my head, I was furious. Because I was, my egoic self was just latching on to the story that I threw up first. He was not the actual real true person to throw up first. And why is he the one getting the blessing? And why is he getting the significance and the acknowledgement with the whole tribe? And I'm just not even getting any kind of blessing. So I got zero blessings and I'm not even being acknowledged for being the first, right? And I know it's a silly, ego story. And at the same time, there's a lesson here. There's a big lesson here, which is I didn't go first. I didn't have the courage to be seen going first. Even though it was recommended, even though it was, quote unquote, socially acceptable. even in a context where we were literally told and encouraged it is okay to get well in front of everybody in the fire, totally socially acceptable. Even then, the stories in my head kept me silencing and needing to look a certain kind of way so that people would accept me. I did not want to be messy and throw up in front of everybody and be seen in my rawness. I didn't want to do it. And it had nothing to do with the social construct, which in that specific context it's acceptable. It had everything to do with me and my fear of being seen. My fear of being seen in the rawness and the messiness and the grossness and the not so cuteness and getting up and needing to wipe my mouth and needing to fix my hair and not wanting to be witnessed in that by people that I didn't know. And it is not so different. Trust me, energetically speaking, it's not so different than getting in front of a stage and being seen for the truth of who you are and saying the thing. It's not so different than standing up in a room full of strangers and saying, hey, no, I don't agree with this. This feels wrong. This doesn't feel right. It's not any different than saying the thing you really want to say on social media instead of just copy and pasting and placating and being part of the circle jerk of whatever else everyone is doing as a collective consensus. So trust, and when you, underneath all of this is self-trust, is learning how to trust yourself and trust in the speaking of your truth and seeing all the ways that you won't let yourself. And the irony of it is all the missed opportunities. In that, funny story I just shared, my missed opportunity was, number one, getting a sacred healing from the shaman, which would have been super helpful because I was going through a hard time. And number two, it would have been recognition, acknowledgement by the tribe. So the very thing I was looking to avoid, which was public shaming, I actually, through avoiding that, I missed out on the thing I was seeking, which was recognition and significance from the tribe. So what I really want to hammer home here is that truth isn't a mindset, it's a vow. I will not abandon myself in the moment of truth. It's not about being certain, it's about staying. Okay? And this is what I really want to keep hammering in. It's not about, oh, this is my truth, therefore I'm right and everybody's wrong. That's not the conversation we're having here. The conversation we're having is, what will it take to not abandon yourself in the moment of truth? What will it take to stay with yourself in that moment where you feel the impulse of soul, of your essence? You feel it wanting to express itself into form, voice, action, emotions, thoughts. And what will it take to trust that impulse? To trust your soul. That your soul is desiring to speak something and it may make no rational sense to your mind. You may think, this is bananas. What are you talking about? This is crazy pants. People won't get it. People won't judge me. But that's not what clear, authentic communication is about. It's about truth. And truth doesn't always make sense to the mind. And the ways that we can identify what is truth and what is not truth is the felt sense that it creates in our body, the barometer of the soul, our body intelligence. Truth feels grounded, open, clear. Have you ever heard somebody say something and it gives you goosebumps, otherwise known as truth bumps? It's your parasympathetic system going, I'm calm. This feels expansive. Truth bumps. Doubt in your body, it feels disembodied. It feels fidgety. It feels like the energy of over-explaining. It feels like contractive when you're doubting yourself. And so, I won't lie, this is a practice. This is something, when I work with my clients, it takes them months sometimes, just to get to that point where they can truly feel that impulse coming through their body and actually speak it into form and stay with it without needing to immediately apologize afterwards or downplay the thing they just said or over explain it, where they can just stay with it, even if they're not certain about it. And that's really important, because speaking the truth is not about being 100% sure about what you're saying or the fact of what you're saying or the scientific evidence of what you're saying. It's about speaking what's moving through you without distortion, without manipulating it or diminishing it or editing it so that it can look a certain way, because that is when it becomes performance. And this is what I have experienced again and again and again in the way that I support clients, but in my own personal experience of relapsing into performance because of my own unchecked fears around who I need to be and what I need to look like in order for me to be accepted. And this is classic, especially in the online coaching world, which is where I've been, doing my thing for the last 10 years. How many times did I edit a post, over edit a post to the point so that it doesn't sound weird? Or maybe sometimes I'll write a post and there's incomplete sentences, or I'm having this poetic train of thought, and then I'll be like, no one's going to understand this. I need to make it into real sentences. But when I restructure the writing, that's when it loses its potency. Or doing masterclasses where I was reading from a script instead of riffing the way that I am here now, where I can just, I can have an outline, but I also speak the words that are coming through me rather than the words that I premeditated and strategically matched to what my ideal client avatar would, enjoy hearing, or what I think they would enjoy hearing, rather than actually speaking from soul, which is where the transmission lies. It's about saying the hard things. And the moments where I didn't want to say the hard things, and so I placated, or I overfiltered, or I was too nice. And I robbed someone else the opportunity to make a change or to grow or to learn a lesson. I robbed myself of those opportunities. Or the moments where you're choosing polish over resonance. That moment where I could have thrown up in the fire. And, as a woman has at the time was very, very, had a lot of patterning around control freak and perfectionism, it might have been an incredible experience for other women to witness a woman like that have the courage to throw up in the fire. I robbed myself of that lesson, even though I got another one. So it was a good trade-off. Either way, it was a lesson I didn't forget. And I could have also given woman a chance to learn from me and what it looks like, modeling what it could have looked like to not be afraid to be messy. Right? So I've gone through ebbs and cycles of this in my life, and I find that the work is catching and identifying, and I'm getting better and better and better at this as I get older and more mature. Where's the point where I'm performing? Where's that fine line where I am performing? I've shared this in, there's another episode that I've done on this podcast where I talk about my decision to back off significantly from social media. And I also go into details about this in my membership, Living from Soul. And the punchline of that story, and you can go either into my membership or to check out that episode if you like. But the punchline is that I became aware of how much I was unconsciously performing on social media because of the way it's designed, right? Not even it's by design. Showcase the highlight reel. And even when you're showcasing the messy, it's still curated somehow. Curate the heck out of your image. And in that curation, I lost the rawness of my truth. And it's a slippery slope, right? It's not even a 0 to 60 kind of thing. It's not like it was overnight. It was those micro things that I was sharing about earlier in the episode, where it's those little words that you're editing, and then you're editing it and then you're editing it again, and then you find yourself kind of thinking in 90-second reel clips. And so you'll like shorten the integrity of your message when you're doing a live or a reel so that you can like fit within the bounds of what algorithmically is working best. And then you start to edit and curate and edit and curate. And all of a sudden, it's like you become a caricature of yourself. It felt like I was starting to become a fabricated icon of who I was. And it didn't feel right to me because I cannot fit into a box. I don't want to fit into a box. And by creating the box and then squeezing myself into it, I was forcing myself to perform into a box. And we do that. We do that by over curating, over editing because of our own fears that, for the most part, until we become aware of them, are unconscious. And in that curating and editing, we become dull. We lose the luster of our spirit. We lose the allure of the mystery, which is that we are actually constantly changing. We're constantly knowing ourselves better. We're constantly shifting, evolving, and moving with the tides of time. So to me, the act of staying in my truth is what allows me to reclaim that aliveness. It's what allows me to honor it. And instead of creating boxes such as, here's my social media and what it looks like, and here's my social media strategy, here's my website and what it looks like, my website strategy, here's like, my pre-recorded masterclass and this is what it looks like, and here's the script for it. Instead of creating boxes for myself based on what I think needs to happen and then trying to fit into them, the actual question is, how do I create systems? How do I put systems and principles in place so that my truth can flow and I can speak and I can change form as I speak it, as I express, life around me changes. And what it looks like practically is, this podcast, right? How do I, instead of pre-controlling, how do I just speak my truth as I'm speaking it and then publish it? And then create assets that go on my social media based on the truth that I've spoken, rather than the other way around. Practically, it looks like, how do I create a business where I have huge chunks of time blocks for me to just be creative and feel into what needs to come through, while at the same time having operations, having sustainability, having structures in place where there's predictable income coming in, revenue streams coming in, right? What does it look like to be in that mastermind and practice this, having the strength and the courage to say, actually, I have to say something. I don't agree with that. Or actually, I want to add on to that. Or actually, I want to share a story that feels really edgy and vulnerable. I'd love to share it. So you don't build trust by getting it right. You build trust by not leaving. You build trust by staying with your truth, even when you're scared. Even when you're afraid that you're going to get canceled. Even when you're afraid that you're going to be misunderstood. Even when you're afraid you're going to be seen. You stick to your truth. You stay with it. You honor it. And you do your best to be able to move that impulse into form, from soul into form, without distortion. I'll leave you with this visual before I move on to the next piece, which is, imagine your voice as a flame and ask yourself the question, will you feed it or will you smother it to keep others warm? Because when we look at courage, which is an essential part of this formula that I'm sharing with you, courage is staying present with truth. And, people misunderstand courage, and it's something, courage is one of the core values in my company, and my core values. I spent a lot of time studying and reading about courage because it is fascinating to me. What is courage? It's not the absence of fear. It's having the volition to act despite fear, is moving even when you have fear. And I believe that a lot of people misunderstand courage as performance. So if you can get on a stage in front of 10,000 people and perform your monkey dance, you have courage. And look, that's not to take away, no, that was a little derogatory, but that's not to take away if you have a script memorized and that's what you need in order for you to work your way up and go in front of a stage of people, and you need to memorize your script and perform in a certain way. Like I'm not wanting to throw shade at that, but it's more about that's not necessarily what courage is. I like to think about courage isn't the roar, it's the breath before the whisper. That's the courage. It's the moment where you decide, okay, I'm going to speak. Okay, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to say the thing. I'm going to break the peace right now. And the reason why it can be misunderstood, similar to confidence, is people think the loudest people in the room, the loudest, most articulate, most, in your face person in the room is the one that's most courageous. Is that really true? It's the one that is most confident. Is that really true? Or are they the ones that are the best at performing? And that's not to say that everyone who's the loudest person in the room is performing. But there's a felt sense that can only truly be felt in the body when it comes to, you can tell when you start to really refine this vision, when you start to refine and really look with discernment and intention, you're going to start to see that courage can be an act that a lot of people put on, and underneath that act is actually somebody who's really afraid, somebody who's not that confident, so needs to overcompensate for it, somebody who needs to put on a show so that people don't see who they really are underneath. Don't be fooled. And I believe there's a time and a place for performance. And sometimes performance can be really fun. Like, heck, I am a Leo rising. For those of you who know astrology, I freaking love, I did acting when I was in my teens. I love acting. I love performing. I think it's really fun. It's really exciting. When you know you're putting on a mask and you're putting on a show and you're fully consenting to that, and people know you're putting on a mask and you're putting on a show. They're going to a theater so they can watch actors perform. They are aware that the people in the theater are actors, and the actors are aware that they're acting a show and they're performing for the audience. What doesn't feel good and is not sustainable is when you forget you're wearing a mask and you're performing, forgetting that you are acting, and you think it's who you really are, and or the audience thinks that your show is real life. That's when it gets problematic for both the audience and the actor. And we've heard the tragic stories of actors who get so enmeshed and self-identify with maybe the character they're playing, the evil character that they're playing, that they commit suicide or they go into psychosis because they just literally cannot separate themselves from the identity that they're playing out. And that represents something really real, which is what happens when we forget that we've put on a show and that we're wearing character armor. What happens when we associate so deeply with these parts of our identity that we literally forget we're performing. The classic archetype of that is, the social media influencer who's so, the travel influencer who's so obsessed about getting the perfect shot everywhere she goes and making sure she looks absolutely divine in her long flowy dresses as she's taking a photo shoot in, the wildlands of Africa, or, the beautiful landscape of Santorini, Greece, overlooking the Mediterranean. And she becomes so obsessed with getting the shot that she actually forgets to enjoy that she's on vacation in one of the most beautiful exotic places on the planet. It is forgotten in the stress and the act of needing to look polished and needing to put a post on Facebook in order to look a certain way so that the feed can be curated and it can look a certain way. Those are the moments where we betray ourselves, we lose our truth. And bringing it back to what it means to speak your truth, it's the same idea. It's the same concept. It is the over curated, word by word script for the masterclass or the workshop or the course that you're teaching that completely strips you of the spaces and places where you crack a joke because you're a funny person, or the places and spaces where maybe you mess up your words, but the message is real and it's raw and it's true and people can really feel you in their heart. It's the places and spaces where that impulse comes through and we need to speak. We can't control that. That's between you and God, source, divine intelligence. You can't control that moment where the impulse comes through and the expression wants to express itself. It's uncontrollable. It's divine intelligence moving through you. But what you can do is build up the courage to open your mouth, or open your fingers if you're typing, and say the thing that needs to be said. It requires a certain level of intimacy with yourself. It requires a certain overcoming of your own fears, awareness of your fears, and an overcoming of them. So the awareness helps you understand what they are and why they're there. The courage helps you take action despite the fear. And when you speak despite the fear, something really magical happens. It's a ripple effect. In the case of that peyote ceremony where I was sitting with 40 eyeballs on me and I needed to speak my truth, and I could feel the impulse coming through me like energy vomit. And I had learned my lesson that time because I already knew. I'm like, I'm going to vomit. If I need to vomit, I will do it in front of freaking everybody because I had already learned that lesson. I didn't expect it to be words instead of puke. But I didn't push it down. And I didn't know why, but I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't push it down despite the fear. And I spoke and I had the courage to dig deep and I pulled out the freaking words and I spoke. And I know that when I spoke, things moved and lives changed. I don't say that lightly. My life changed for one, but there are multiple people in that room that reported their lives changed in that moment. And none of that would have happened if I swallowed my truth. So how do we build your courage muscle? Well, I would say, this is something that I teach my clients, is to start with low stake truths. And that low stakes truth, like low flame. You don't need to, go to a medicine journey and take a bunch of medicine and then speak your truth in front of 40 strangers. You don't have to go there. That might be 0 to 60 for your nervous system right now, but you can start with low stakes truth. And what that looks like is record a voice note saying what you really want to say before hitting post. If you want to post something on social media, maybe just record a separate voice note saying what you really, really, really want to say with that post. And you might find that the truth of what you're saying in that uncensored voice note, it sounds and feels, the texture of it feels more real and more authentic than the thing that you've been over editing and writing. And you can take elements from that raw, unfiltered voice note and weave it back in. Or you can freaking turn that voice note into text, right? Or it can look like just letting your body speak before your brain polishes the sentence. It can look like, how do you say the thing you want to say? Instead, maybe you don't have yet the courage to say it have the conversation in front of that person. Maybe you just take out a pillow and then you have the conversation with the pillow first, so you can practice what it's like to be in your truth. Let your body speak. Let your body say what it needs to say before your brain's like, is she going to understand what I'm saying? Am I structuring correctly? Am I going too long? And ask yourself the question, is this performance or is it presence? And your body will know. If you're connected to soul, and if you're not, you're definitely going to want to do my soul alignment meditation. Shameless plug-in. It is an amazing free meditation that I offer so that you can come back into soul connection and actually listen to the whispers of your soul. But you're going to be able to start, when you ask yourself the question, you're going to be able to tell when you're performing or when you're being present. And that's the practice. If you're not there yet, no problem. That's the practice. That is where you put yourself in environments where it's about presence and it's about not about performance. And by the way, another shameless plugin, I didn't even know that was coming, but my Living from Soul Substack membership is literally like, this is why I created it. One of the reasons why is to cultivate a space where you can be present instead of performative. It is a space where you can actually show up. And this is, this is where I give my raw, unfiltered truths and I go 10 levels deeper. You know what? I do these like up to, 5 to sometimes 20-minute voice note trainings every week where I'm just spitting truth so you can hear it, so you can calibrate it to it. And it's a space in a community where we can actually have these really deep and raw conversations. So, in the podcast here, I'm not going to talk about what is it exactly that I said in that peyote ceremony, but you can bet your butt that elements of that are going to be inside of Living from Soul, because that's where I speak my unfiltered truth with my people. And so know that you can either join a space or create a space. Even it can be a woman's circle, a men's circle, a community, a mastermind, where you get to be in presence instead of performance, but you're going to want to surround yourself with people who are vibrating like with the same ethos, who are on the same page around choosing truth over comfort and having a ruthless commitment to truth in love. Because truth without love can sometimes cut in ways that is just not pleasant or welcome. Truth in love. And remember this, if someone walks away after you speak your truth, that's not rejection. It's alignment revealing itself. You're not for them. You are not for them, but your truth is for someone. So can you give yourself the gift of surrounding yourself with people and putting yourself in places and spaces where you are welcome to speak your truth, even if someone doesn't agree with you? Where it's not just an echo chamber of people agreeing with each other, or you being able to speak your truth so long as it's in alignment with the rest of the group. The real places that I believe we as a society need to create and cultivate are places where you can speak your truth, that impulse that's moving through you, and it's welcome, even if not everybody agrees. In the case of the examples that I shared with my mom, kudos to the pastor, because he went up to my mom afterwards and he did try to further debate with her, which was a sign of emotional maturity. Whether, I don't remember what the outcome of that was, but the fact that he wasn't just like, you need to leave my church right now. That is not an inclusive space that welcomes truth. The pastor spoke to her, entertained her. At one point was like, okay, let's talk about this later. And then went up to her and talked about it later. And I respect that. That was also another beautiful way that inclusivity was modeled for me, was to see that, okay, in that space, even though she said something really controversial and she's not even of their religion, there's still a space where she can speak her truth and he can speak his truth, and they can have a debate and a conversation around it with anyone needing to be right or no one needing to be wrong, but also just being about what is real and how can we expand our perception of reality, and how can we think in different ways, and how can we each remain in integrity to our own authenticity while speaking our truth without needing to make anyone right or wrong, but also without needing to distort or betray ourselves to fit into a box of what we think will give us love, support, acceptance. Because shrinking ourselves to fit into the mold is never going to do anyone any good. So another question I'm going to leave you with is, what's one truth you've been rehearsing in your head but haven't yet said out loud? Remember that your voice creates ripples even if you can't see them. In the specific story I share with you, I had the gift of multiple people coming up to me and saying, wow, that was transformative. But Don't hold your breath for that, because sometimes you will speak the truth. And I don't even remember in that church example with my mom, I don't remember if anyone came up to her afterwards. They didn't need to, though, for her to stand in that. You don't need somebody to validate your experience afterwards, although it might be nice and it might feel good. But can you stand in your truth even when no one comes up to you afterwards and validates you for it? Can you still do it? Can you still stand in your truth? There is this collective healing that emerges when somebody decides to be a truth teller. Because every time you speak something real, you invite someone else to stop performing. There's been multiple times where I've been in a group sharing circle and I could feel that impulse. And I'm like, oh, come on. No, not right now, not right now, right now, right now. But I've done this. I've gone through the rodeo enough times to just trust that impulse now. I didn't used to. I didn't used to trust it. I used to hold it back. I used to think it and then want to talk to my friends about it after the fact. Or I would used to think it and then watch someone else say the thing that I was thinking and then get mad that they said it and people agreed with them. And then I didn't say it first. So I didn't get the validation and the significance. All of those stories. And now I've just learned to trust the impulse and being like, oh, I'm going to speak this, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to say it and I'm going to say it from my heart. And so long as I say it in my heart, I have to trust in this impulse. I have to trust in myself and I just have to trust that this is going to have an impact. It's going to trigger somebody. It's going to move something in the field, in the group field. And every time I've spoken something, I can now feel the ripple effect, even if I'm triggering somebody. But I cannot tell you how many times I have said, hey, I'm actually not comfortable with this. Or, hey, has anyone noticed that this thing's being said, but it's contradicting this other thing that this person said? I'm a little confused, right? Like whenever I say it from a place of not attacking, blaming, or shaming somebody, but taking responsibility for the reality of my experience and also pointing out the thing that isn't feeling in congruence with me, I've had people either, yeah. I mean, again, it's not about needing the validation, but it happens. It happens where I've had either someone say, I feel that way too. I echo that feeling. Or they'll start sharing a story that they didn't even think to share because it was provoked by that comment. Or they come up afterwards and say, God, I'm so glad someone else said that. I was feeling that way, but I was too embarrassed to speak up. You give other people the permission to speak up for themselves when you have the courage to speak up for yourself. You give other people the permission to stop performing when you say something real. It's the gift that keeps on giving, and it takes a whole lot of courage. But remember this, you don't need a million likes. You need one soul to feel less alone because of what you said. And that's sacred impact. When I think about leadership, being a leader, it's no longer about how many followers or how many likes or how many comments or how many people responded to this thing or how many people do I have in my club. That's no longer the story. It's one person at a time. One person at a time. And when I speak and I can say, hand on my heart, this is my truth. I'm not projecting it onto anyone. I'm not blaming or shaming anything or making anything outside of me my fault. It's saying that it's their fault. But hand on my heart, this is my truth. This is what's moving through me. This is what I'm seeing. This is my perception of reality right now. Is anyone else seeing this? Does anyone else feel this way? This is what's moving through me right now. And to be able to sit in that and be with myself in that, even if no one else raises their hand, even if I don't get the kind of response I wish I could get to soothe the feelings of fear or embarrassment that might be coming through me that moment as I'm sharing, even if I don't get the response that I wish I had, can I stay with myself without needing to go into over explanation and I'm sorry. Did anyone? Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to say that. Sorry, guys. Or over apologizing. Just being with it and returning to that energetic responsibility which is when you don't speak, someone else who needed your words may never hear them. And once I really got that, once I really got the deep impact that my truth spoken can have, even on one soul, even if that soul is me, which in my experience, it's always more, it's not just me. It's usually more than me. But even if it was just me, having the experience of being able to speak my truth and trust myself and stay with myself already forges me into a better leader, already makes me stronger, already makes me more confident, already builds my self-trust with myself. And on top of that, whoever needed to hear them, whoever needed to see that modeled, whoever needed in that moment to have a permission slip, to not fake it, to not perform anymore, to speak the story that they wanted to speak, but were too afraid to do so. It's that crack that makes the difference and has a ripple effect on the collective, in the group field that you're in the stadium that you're speaking in, with the audience that you're addressing online, whatever that may look like for you. So I offer you an invitation, which is next time the truth rises, that impulse rises through your body, pause, put your hand on your heart, take 3 deep breaths, and ask yourself, what's the truth moving through me? And then say it anywhere, just say it. Say it to a mirror, put it in a voice note, put it in a text. Just don't swallow it. Your voice doesn't have to be polished to be powerful. The voice that shakes is the one that shifts the room. Remember that. So, all of that being said, to complete today's episode, if this stirred something in you, if you're done outsourcing your voice and you're ready to speak from the deepest parts of your being, I created something for you. I actually created 2 things for you. Thing number 1 is my Living from Soul membership, which is on Substack. This is a sacred space that I've created where truth telling is the norm. This is where I share mini trainings every week where I speak into these little truth pockets. And also we have monthly wisdom gatherings. There's a community element, and there's beautiful trainings and workshops that you get immediate access to as part of this membership. So it's a really beautiful place. It's a sacred space for you to step into. Think of it as a cozy coffee shop and a beautiful, beautiful library where you get to step into and just consume wisdom, slow form, at peace, in a way that just deeply speaks to your soul and therefore transforms you. And thing number 2 is the art of embodied transmission. This is my free masterclass on how to speak from soul, not strategy. And at the same time, having both soul and strategy. So this is for leaders who don't just want to be heard, they want to be felt. So you can sign up at the link that is going to be in my show notes. I would love to see you in either one of these offerings. I'd love to walk beside you and support you in your journey to unlocking your voice, speaking your truth, and having the courage to just unleash your voice in a way that shakes the room and leaves impact for generations to come. So if I can be of any support to that journey, I'll raise my hand up. So thank you again so much for tuning in today. As always, if there's anything that really touched you in today's conversation, don't be shy. Screenshot it, post it on social media, tag me in it, let me know what you loved. And if you really love these episodes, the invitation is to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. This is what allows other people to find these episodes, and it allows people to see that, this is a legit podcast with loads of value, and support them in finding this message. All right. Thank you so much for being here today. I love you, and I will see you in the next one. Mwah. Thank you, beautiful humans, for tuning into today's episode of It's Not What You Think. If you loved what you received today, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on future episodes, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, as it helps us reach even more amazing listeners like you. If we aren't already connected on social media, come receive even more tips and inspiration by following me on Instagram at Celinne DaCosta or visiting my website at CelinneDaCosta.com. After listening to this episode, I invite you to take a few moments to reflect. What stood out to you? What were your key takeaways or breakthroughs? And if there was one action step you could take from this, what would it be? Thank you again for joining me on this journey. I'm sending you so much love, and I can't wait to connect in the next episode. Until then, keep sharing your unique gifts and living out your most magical life.